Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. My dogs are barking. Let's get to it. Mike and Natalie videos. The Rabbit Hat said, and there's a quotes, I went to 150 restaurants and then ranked them all. That's what I was saying. Is the most Dr. Kirk sentence you can get without mentioning psychology. Really? When I said I went to 150 Japanese restaurants and ranked them all, is that a very Dr. Kirk thing to say? I don't know. Anon says, I love how Dr. Kirk often goes on tangents about food and restaurants. You don't want to encourage me, Anon. I would talk about that. I'd have a whole channel just dedicated to that. In fact, just a side note, when I started this podcast 13 years ago, and by the way, we're going to have a 13-hour live stream on August 7th, Saturday, August 7th, I think. So if you want to join us for our 13th anniversary show in August, mark that in your calendars. But when I first started the podcast, I wanted to do psychology stuff, but I called it Psychology in Seattle because I wanted to review restaurants. And so we actually there were episodes in the beginning where we actually brought a camera crew and a sound crew, and we actually went into various restaurants and ate food and reviewed it. And it's just so hilarious to think, like, why would anyone want to go to a psychology podcast and hear about me talking about the finer points of barbecue in Seattle? Anyway, Tracy says, I want to know the sushi place too. In the Mike and Natalie video, I was like, what sushi place did they go to? I want to know the sushi place too. I love sushi. My favorite in Seattle is Japanesa next to the Seattle Art Museum. Yeah, I've been there too. It's a lovely restaurant. I know it is not traditional sushi, but I love it. I feel bad for Natalie. Mike doesn't seem to want to understand her culture. Eastern European people have a different demeanor. They often come across as being harsh to Americans. They aren't harsh, they just communicate differently. Agreed. Kayla, and really this is a problem with many of the couples. I don't know many of the couples if they ever talk about, I wonder if our culture is different, and that plays into the way we communicate to each other and the way we interpret each other. And maybe that leads to some misunderstandings that causes us to want to divorce each other and throw wedding rings at each other. It's just like, you think being on a show like 90 Day Fiancé, because you got to think the people have watched it before, right? So you think they wouldn't want to make the same mistakes. Anyway, Kayla says, I kind of feel like the nude photo thing was discussed privately between them, and they agreed to not talk about it in front of the cameras. Then I think Natalie got hurt and knew it would embarrass or hurt Mike. That's what I think is behind this smile when she's being interviewed. Yeah, that's a really good point, Kayla. So I didn't think about that in the moment, but they do seem to be having conversations behind the scenes about what they're going to reveal. And we could absolutely imagine that happening, really for any of the couples, but particularly for this couple. They both put up walls, particularly Mike, and we could absolutely see him having a private conversation with her of like, look, we cannot reveal these kinds of things. You can't talk about this in front of the cameras. You can't talk about that. And then when the cameras were on, she felt a little bit emboldened, brought it up because she always wanted to bring it up. And, she was hurt in that moment, so she brought it up. And then I think she instantly regretted it. You could kind of tell on her face, the way they edited it anyway, that she regretted it. And then he got up and walked away because I think he had said, I'm not talking about that anymore. And if you bring it up, I'm just going to walk away, which is what he did, which is interesting. I mean, you got to wonder what conversations they're having behind closed doors. But yeah. So maybe what happened was, when she got home, he said, look, honey, I love you, but if you're going to bring that stuff up, I'm just going to walk away because I don't want that stuff to be out there on the television. Now, you have to also ask yourself, why would you volunteer to be on a reality TV show? But we won't get into that, I suppose. But then you say, Kayla, that's why I think she was smiling when she was being interviewed. It's hard to say. But Ida actually had a comment on that, and they say, I often smile when I'm talking about something uncomfortable or something that hurts me, and I can't really help it. For me, I think it's a defense mechanism. I don't know about Natalie, though. Yeah, so it's possible that for Natalie, she was just really uncomfortable and she started to smile. Or she was doing it on purpose. Who knows? But I would venture to say that she was uncomfortable and didn't really know how to say it. Trisha says, this is what I don't get about Natalie. I get her being annoyed or upset about the boob photo, but all of this happened before she got to America. If it was such a big deal, why even go to America? Yeah, I suppose so. So I'm forgetting the breast photo. I'm sure that's something, but I'm forgetting that detail. Was that during the tell-all or something? But all right, so I'll take your word for it, Trisha, that it happened before she came and it's still upsetting her. So was it that a friend of hers, a friend of Mike's, sent a nude picture to him before she came to this? Anyway. Now, as I've been saying from the beginning, there's nothing wrong with Natalie being threatened by the friend. There's nothing wrong with Natalie being a little jealous. What do you do with that jealousy? What do you do with that feeling of fear? You say to your partner, look, I am 99% sure that you would never cheat on me, particularly with your friend. So I don't want to get in between you, your relationship with your friend. I want you to have friends. I have friends. I don't, But I just have to tell you that when I hear about them or I see you interacting, it triggers something in me that I'm going to take responsibility for. It's not your fault. It's my issue. But you could really help me out by reassuring me that you love me, and by, I don't know, when you do talk to that friend, just kind of make me feel close to you in some way, because, that would help me out. That's the approach to jealousy. The approach to jealousy that people often do, particularly on the show, is there's something wrong with you. Why did you do that? This is disgusting. That person's out to get you. The approach to the reason why you're feeling jealous is because you are afraid you're going to lose your partner. That's what jealousy is. Jealousy isn't get your hands off my man. Jealousy is I'm afraid I'm going to lose you. I'm afraid that person is going to tempt you away from me. I don't feel secure in our relationship. That's what you want to focus on. And it's not necessarily the other person's fault that you feel afraid. You feel afraid. You don't know if it's other people's fault. You know that you feel afraid. Don't blame other people unless you absolutely know it's the other person's fault. And even then, it's not useful. You just say, I feel afraid. I feel threatened. I feel like I'm going to lose you. I don't want to lose you. Can you reassure me that you're not going to lose me? That you're not going to leave me? Can you reassure me that you don't want to be with that person? I know there's no reason why you have to reassure me. I just have these reactivities based on my past. And I think most people would understand that. Acme says, I think they are faking for the show when they seem happy, but it's too difficult for them to keep it up. I think we see a glimpse of what's really going on in every episode. I don't think they like each other. Interesting, Acme. I could see it going either way. I could see them putting on a show for the show being, I could see them putting on a show that they're doing really well, even though they're doing really badly behind the scenes. I could also see them putting on a show that they're doing badly on the show, even though they're doing really well behind the scenes. It's probably the first one, but who knows? Kalani and Asuelu videos. Sneffery says, to pronounce her name, Kalani, not Kalani. Yeah. So, by the way, I recorded a lot of episodes where I say Kalani. So expect those to be posted in the next couple weeks or so. So don't, I know it's Kalani. It's weird because when I first started with the couple, I was saying Kalani. And somewhere along the line, I just started saying Kalani. I don't know why that happened. And I really hate it when people mispronounce names that are easy to pronounce. Take the time, get to know the name. It's not hard. Maybe you mess it up sometimes, which is an innocent mistake, which I did. But I'm terribly sorry. It's Kalani. It's not Kalani. Demgem says, hey, Doc, Polynesian here. I'm a Polynesian. The men, especially the ones who grew up on the islands, can be known to express themselves like the way Asuelu does. For Polynesians, it's very common to be smacked around. We call it a hiding, when you hide someone, as a form of discipline. However, those that don't hit, like my granddad who stopped giving hidings when he had his grandkids, still show the same intimidating behavior to at least scare you into behaving. Okay, that's interesting. Good to know. I always like it when people inform me about their part of the world. Tentavamp says, I said it earlier, but I think this was really hinted at when he showed a particular amount of distress when the baby was crying in the car. He made a comment like, I just want to make him stop, which, as someone who gets overstimulated and angry very easily from the sound of babies crying, was super familiar to me. I think he has a sound issue. Yeah, so there's a lot of speculation about the diagnosis of Asuelu. And I think I said in the video, I don't want to participate in that. I know enough about these diagnoses to know that you can't watch a reality TV show and just say, oh, they're autistic, or they have ADHD, or they have that. You really just can't tell. There's sometimes, if someone had a quintessential form of, say, autism, then it would lend itself to making a guess, a more firm guess about a diagnosis by watching a reality TV show. But again, it would just be a guess because we can't diagnose from afar. But Asuelu presents no behavior that indicates any quintessential or common, typical presentation of anything in the DSM. Does that mean he doesn't suffer from anything in the DSM or doesn't have any neurological difference? No, there's just no evidence. The show kind of annoyingly never goes into that kind of stuff, but it'd be a boring show if they did. But I'm always curious about all that stuff. But anyway, yeah, you're saying, Tenta Vamp, that it seems like he has a sound issue. Maybe. I think anyone in that situation would have been stressed. Kalani was stressed out. Asuelu was stressed out when the baby was crying in the back of the car. Typically, for people with autism who have a sound sensitivity, they will exhibit pretty extreme behaviors when they are faced with a loud, annoying sound to them. That can be pretty noticeable when you're watching, and he didn't really exhibit that. Again, I'm not saying he isn't on the spectrum, but we just don't know. And I really don't like the way, I think I said this in the video, I don't like the way people, whenever anyone is a little quirky or has the tiniest bit of behavior that it might indicate being on the autism spectrum, they're like, oh, that person's autistic. It's just a simplistic way of looking at these kinds of things. It's much more complicated. Good old Jules says, about what Dr. K said about teenagers and people not treating a child with ADHD well, and so the child grows up internalizing that they're dumb or lazy, I can definitely confirm this from my own experience. It sucked. I have ADHD, and I believed I was stupid, lazy, and just not going to amount to anything in life because my teachers and parents would often tell me that I'm just so lazy and I don't apply myself. Yeah, it's one of the tragedies of various different differences that people will have as children. As an adult, you can work around it a little bit more, but when you're a kid and you have ADHD, it's so much interferes with your ability to perform as you're supposed to in schools, which really, raises the question of, are schools inclusive to all kinds of kids, and should they be adjusted? I don't know exactly the answer to that, but I would like to think that it should be. And I know some schools are inclusive, but I think we have a long way to go. Meaning that for some kids, it's really hard for them to sit in a chair and read a book all day long and sit quietly and raise their hand and pay attention to a teacher that's all the way across the room when there are birds outside and someone has their cell phone out. It can be a lot for some people to keep track of. Even just the idea of giving someone homework and expecting them to be able to remember to open their bag, look at their homework, do the homework, put it back in their bag, bring it to school, turn it in. That's like almost impossible for some people with higher levels of ADHD. And yet schools continue to have that model. And when you don't do it, they just assume you're being defiant or you're lazy or you're stupid or something like that, when it's just like, no, it's none of those things. Plus, why would you think that? It's just there's actually something different about some people's brains that makes it hard, if not impossible, for them to keep track of those things without a lot of support, they can do it. It's not like kids can't do homework with ADHD, but they need other kind of measures, like a checklist or checking in with the parents and the teachers. Or just have them do the homework in class. Let me just say this: if there was no homework for kids, say 3rd grade to 7th grade, Past that, you probably need to do some homework. But if you had, and some schools actually will actually try to do this, and there's a lot of research on this, that if you give no homework and you just have them do it in class, then a lot of the issues with the ADHD go away, and the kid won't internalize these ideas that they are stupid, lazy, rejectable, not good enough, and because they can succeed, they're doing their homework and they get a little distracted, and you're there to say, okay, I see you're distracted, let's get back to your homework. Oh, okay, because kids want to succeed, and when they bump up against failure and failure and failure, and they're trying and they fail and fail and fail, then they just conclude, I am a failure. I am stupid. I must be lazy. And one option available, which a lot of kids will do, is they just give up. They just, when they're being assigned, they don't even try because they're like, why try? And then they might start identifying that they're a bad kid, that they're a rebel, that they're one of the bad kids. And then they're really gone by that point, right? Because it's hard to bring them back into. So if we can stop that early on, with different ways, with more individualized ways of teaching them, then they can stay in the zone of wanting, because most kids, the vast majority of kids, the younger kids, really want to do well in school. And when you give them the ability to succeed, then they never make those self-judgments and they never, completely jump ship on the whole school enterprise. I'm generalizing, of course. This isn't true for all ADHD kids, and it's really true for any neurological difference, whether you have dyslexia or dysgraphia or, whatever kind of difference you have neurologically is sometimes accounted for and accommodated for and sometimes not. Jordan says, Dr. Kirk, great point about not wanting to pathologize Asuelu. It's interesting because the behavior that we see from other cast members is uncomfortable, but the audience isn't so quick to label them with a disorder. At the same time, much of their behavior, yelling, fighting, lack of composure, could be pathologized in other cultures. It just goes to show we need to work towards understanding where people are coming from rather than labeling them so quickly. Agreed, Jordan. Simone says, when people say men are babysitting their kids, I feel like my head is going to explode. Agreed. The other phrase is helping out. I help out with the kids. I help out with the chores. It's like you're not helping out. You're doing. You're part of the thing. Sable says, good old Sable Rain says, I feel so bad for Oliver, the kid. It's his birthday, but everyone is tense and unhappy. His dad stayed in the room all day. Kids are so sensitive. It's making me tear up thinking about how he must be feeling. Agreed. Yeah, that was pretty awful. Aaron says, I was diagnosed with ADHD last year, and I'm 31 years old. I really struggled socially in school, and the bullying I went through from students and teachers really, really messed me up. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm a successful adult with a beautiful family, but it took a lot of work, and I still have daily struggles. I would say, though, that the worst part of ADHD for me was the torment I endured when I was young. It has affected me. It has affected every part of my life. I've been in therapy over a year now, though, and your videos have helped a ton. Well, good for you, Aaron. Good for you. I'm glad you're recovering from the abuse that you essentially went through just because you are a little different. Rackle says, Asuelu reminds me of myself in my teens and early 20s. Looking back, I can say that my irritability and lashing out were probably tied to undiagnosed dysthymia and ADHD. But at the time, all I knew was anyone who asked me to do something I didn't want to do was a jerk face who got what was coming to them. I just want to give Asuelu a hug and get him into therapy. Agreed. Mad Marcia says, I kind of think he does wake up and think I'm going to be a jerk face today. So often you'll hear me say, you know what, I don't think Asuelu wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a jerk face. But Mad Marcia disagrees, says that Mad Marcia believes that Asuelu does wake up in the morning and consciously decide to be a jerk face. Well, we don't know. Angela and Michael videos. Louise says, we all assume it's mostly men who are abusive. That's probably true with physical abuse. But Angela is an example of women being very abusive verbally and emotionally with their partners. Michael seems afraid of her. Agreed, Louise. By the way, some people were commenting that I was glossing over the abuse that Angela commits on Michael. And if I did that, I'm sorry. That's wrong of me. And I want to say that I absolutely do recognize, and I feel like I do talk about it sometimes, and I will talk about it right now, that Angela is absolutely verbally and emotionally abusive of Michael. The kinds of things that she said, the things that she's done, I mean, you could even argue she's been physically abusive at times, has just been completely out of control. And she screams and she shuts him down. She's not just abusive to Michael, she's abusive to a lot of people during the tell-alls. And I think we understand where it comes from. She has tremendous insecurities, and she has to come out strong. And that's what I think I've been hypothesizing is early in life, for some people, when they're being victimized, they learn that they can protect themselves by victimizing other people before they get victimized, because it's just assumed that they're going to get victimized somehow. So they have to establish their power and dominance over everyone around them as a way of protecting themselves, which makes sense to us. But when you become an adult and you no longer need to do that anymore and you're just abusing everyone around you, then that's not okay, right? So yeah, anyway, Angela's behavior has been an example of someone who is verbally and emotionally abusive, for sure. Sarah says, I have never had someone model how to say, so sometimes I model how to say things. I will say, how about you say it this way? Sarah says, I've never had someone model how to say things. It helps a lot because if you have never seen it, then you really don't have any idea you could ever say it differently. I've been in therapy forever and never had any of the therapists model those things to me. Ashley says, Michael lies about things that don't even matter because she blows up over the littlest things. When he tells the truth, she still blows up. He's scared of her, to be honest. Yeah. Ben says, I was raised in an incredibly strict, controlling parents, by incredibly strict, controlling parents. And so lying became a part of everyday life in order to avoid getting caught and disciplined. So I was actually hypothesizing that Michael might come from that, or at least is, experiencing that with Angela. When I eventually left home, I find myself continuing to lie about the most trivial things, literally for no apparent reason, such as lying about which month I was born in or what time I had dinner at. There was absolutely no gain whatsoever from these lies. The only way I can explain it is that lying had become completely habitual to me. I had to work really hard to stop myself from doing it. Yeah, and so I treated a lot of teenagers and kids and young adults who actually had that habit still. And it's really hard to break. It's a very, very difficult thing to break. And again, you describe it, that when you tell the truth and you get abused or yelled at in some way, then your neurology actually changes such that you instead of having a knee-jerk reaction of telling the truth, you have a knee-jerk reaction of telling a lie, because you actually will preserve your safety if you an effective lie is a lie that is said really quickly, right? If you hesitate, then people detect you're lying. So your neurology gets into this habit. It's not a choice. It's something that you learn by experiencing the world, and it can be very, very hard to change. The issue, though, is that when I'd be talking to kids, they often would lie about lying. And it would be really hard for them to enter into conversation with me about breaking that habit. But sometimes I'd get them to, and they would, talk about it, and we would work on it. But it took a long time. Essentially, it was a lot of things. One was learning. I would actually just do corrective experiences in session. I'd be like, "What's your name?" They'd tell me, what year were you born? And just get into that habit of telling me the truth. The other was, before responding, trying to relax a little bit. Like, someone's asking me questions. Am I in danger? No, I'm not in danger. Let's relax. I don't have to. There's no threat here. So I don't, because even just asking questions can be a threat to someone, because when they were young, questions were often a threat from someone. Ashley says about Michael and Angela, this is abuse. Imagine a man doing the same to a woman. Yes. Sarah says, yes, it is physical abuse, when she put the cake in his face. Just because it's done in a comical manner doesn't mean it isn't abuse. It's physical contact done in anger. Correct. I mean, not correct, but I agree. Dre says, I think Angela has been very deceptive about having children. She knows she can't have any, yet she still leads him on with false hope that she can. She really doesn't understand his culture at all. Frederic says, whenever I watch this show, I think, am I the only one who would Google the heck out of the culture where my loved one is coming from? That's a good point. All right, Elizabeth and Andre videos. Starting on those, which are interesting. A lot of you have been asking me to watch this couple for a long time, and I didn't know what I'd be getting into, but it has been really interesting to watch. Schaefer says, truly baffled by Libby saying she's the rebel of her family and doesn't play by the rules when she pretty much seems to do everything either her family or Andre tell her to do. Yeah, that was a bit of and I've been wondering about that myself. What does she mean that she's the rebel of her family? Does that mean that she is able to talk back? We also don't see a lot of the other siblings, so I assume that there's some reason for that. But yeah, she hasn't exhibited a lot of rebelliousness. Now, I don't necessarily want her to, but I'm just curious as to what she was referring to. Good old Sweetie Darlin says, I'm just here to leave a like on your video because I don't think I can handle watching this couple and hearing Libby's family talk about Murica this and Murica that again. Yeah. Kelsey says, my partner is also Moldovan. His stereotypical man, so, Andre's stereotypical man roles are extremely normal to that area. Also, I'm from Tampa, Florida, and there is none of this traditional asking the father for the daughter's hand in marriage. People in Tampa are more likely to get drunk and accidentally marry than do that. Right. So in that video, I was asking, so is it universal in Tampa that you ask the father for the hand in marriage? Because in Seattle, it's not. It's actually a very odd thing to ask the father before you ask the person you want to marry. Ava says, what's always bugged me about these two. Now, by the way, I'm not saying it's wrong to ask the father. I'm just saying they were claiming that the family was claiming that it was completely universal. Ava says, what's always bugged me about these two, Elizabeth and Andre, is that it seems like Elizabeth puts Andre in the middle of her family because she complains to her family. She tells them everything he said to her and then goes home to Andre and tells him exactly everything and more of what her family says. Andre can be an ass, but it's her fault for putting the family in the middle. Right. So I don't know if I've said this in the video, but I've been thinking it, which is that Libby, Elizabeth, will complain about the fact that everyone's fighting with each other, but she has fed both sides with tons of negative information. I would venture to say that 95% of their ill will towards the other side is because of what Elizabeth has fed to them. Now, you could argue that Elizabeth was only just passing along information and facts, but you have to think about that. If you want your spouse to get along with your family of origin, you want to think about what you're feeding that side. Leia said, the lady who created the gender reveal party idea said she regrets it because of how ridiculous it's gotten. Interesting. So in the video from last week, there was the gender reveal. So I didn't know that. Or maybe I did hear that. The lady who created the gender reveal party idea says she regrets it because of how ridiculous it has gotten. Alyssa says, I'm from Los Angeles. The damage that those gender reveal parties did to our wildlife is unbelievable. Also, one, you are not being a fuddy-duddy. Gender reveal parties are outdated. And two, yes, I have heard of the term fuddy-duddy. Right. So in the video, I was like, am I being a fuddy-duddy for thinking gender reveal parties are a little silly? And have you heard of the word fuddy-duddy? And let me be clear. I'm not saying, if you have a gender reveal party, that's fine. But one, well, is it fine, actually? At the very least, you need to be environmentally safe. Don't go to the woods with fireworks. I think it's pretty obvious. The other thing is that people's genders are not exactly, you don't know what gender they're going to be. You know what the sonogram has, what that person has told you about anatomy, but you have no idea what gender the person's going to be. So it's a little, I'm guessing that in 5-10 years, gender reveal parties will be, not popular with people for this reason. because of what about trans people? What about non-binary people? You know, it's the fact that they're still going. I'm guessing that people aren't doing anyway. I don't. Cam says, being a trans person, gender reveal parties just make me laugh. As the old saying goes, man plans and God laughs. Right. Jack says, hi, Kirk. I'm a trans man, and you are definitely not being a fuddy-duddy. Thank you for putting this out there. 2, I am only 27, and I have heard of the term fuddy-duddy. Thank you for answering my questions, y'all, because I like this to be a conversation. Sonny says, wait, his rules were that he had to keep, the father, Chuck, right? Wait, so Chuck's rules were that they had to keep the house up. That's not really controlling. That's literally the most basic of requests. And Chuck feels like he's being taken advantage of because he is. Interesting. Paul says, I feel like I have to side with the father on this one. He didn't say it in the nicest way, but they did get pregnant without any planning on how they would afford to start a family. And also he didn't have to give them a whole entire house to stay rent-free. Of course he's hurt that his father seems to show no gratitude. Yeah. Yeah, the family dynamics is interesting in Elizabeth's family and with the addition of Andre. And I'm really curious to see how this whole thing plays itself out. Because I feel like a lot of people in this family, I think everyone is well-meaning. Charlie, I don't know. But I think everything is trying their best. But they just seem to be completely missing each other. And too many defenses that are getting in the way and triggering each other. And it just seems like it doesn't have to be that way, right? And anyway, so I look forward to watching them and learning more and commenting. And I also look forward to reading your comments and to comment on your comments and comment below on my comments on your comments from my videos. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.